external intervention by Russia, China, and the United States. And since Iran is against that intervention, that's why Iran is being painted as a danger, as a terrorist group, which it's not. For instance, Major General Qasem Soleimani, who knows him? Which one of you has ever heard of his name? Show of hands. Nobody has ever heard the name Qasem Soleimani? Well, Major General Qasem Soleimani was the leader of one military group in Iran. Iran has 3 military forces: Army, Basij, Sepah. Qasem Soleimani was the leader of Sepah. He was assassinated by the American forces in Syria. And they painted him as the big bad leader of the terrorist group Quds, which is not true. You cannot call the leader of an army a terrorist. If that's true, then the commander-in-chief of the United States is also a terrorist, because he is the leader of the American army. But since that army was in front of them, for preventing them from getting inside the Middle East and intervening the way they like, he became the leader of the terrorist group. That's another thing that you should always make sure. There's a difference between being a terrorist and being a patriot. There's a difference between being a terrorist and being an army person. Okay? Always find the right definitions of the words you hear before you accept them. So, why is Iran important then? When we combine all that we've heard. Well, first of all, it was the first democracy in the region. The first Islamic country that became democratic inside the Middle East was Iran. In 1979, it was the first country that overthrew the aristocratic regime and changed its regime into a democratic regime. Yes, it is young. It's only 40 years old. So it has flaws, it has mistakes, it has shortcomings. But it doesn't mean it is not a democracy. Even though it's a weak democracy, nonetheless, it is a democracy. It's important because it has the right relationship with the United States. When we are talking about politics, we cannot ignore the United States. America is the big bad wolf, right? Wherever you look in politics, you see an American flag. So countries that are in a hostile relationship with that flag are painted as terrorists, are painted as bad guys. Why? Because right now the United States has the upper hand. And though that makes Iran important as well, because Iran is one of those big guys that stands in front of the United States, that believes that the United States is actually doing the right thing. On the other hand, Iran has the highest majority of Shia. Islam, the religion that is followed in the Middle East, is divided into 2 main groups, Sunni and Shia. They are not that much different from one another, but they have their minor differences. And most of the Shia people in the Middle East are residing in Iran. And since there have been many different conflicts between the Shia and the Sunni, having the highest majority of Shia people makes Iran an important region, an important country. Another thing that makes Iran quite important is the amount of oil it has. Iran is the 4th country in the world when it comes to oil reserves. And that's, again, why it's so important. And why the United States is actually against Iran. Because in 1978, Iran nationalized its oil and stopped giving free oil to the United States. And that was actually when the animosity between the United States and Iran began. Not for human rights violations, something that the United States does so often itself. Not for nuclear weapons, which started in 2006. And by the way, Iran does not have nuclear weapons. It's just a lie. Not because of those, but because Iran said, I will not give you any more oil. It was actually like the relationship between a bully and the bullied. When the bullied finally rose up and said, I will not give you my lunch money anymore. And that's what made the bully angry and started all these commotions that made us as citizens suffer. That resulted in me as an Iranian to suffer just because I am from Iran. And finally, the position it has on the planet. It is actually a big area in the middle of the world. So whenever you want to go, you have to pass Iran. Otherwise, you have to go around Iran, which makes your trip much longer. So having a safe Iran and a safe Middle East is quite important for any international endeavor. And one other thing you need to know is about Iran's relationship with other countries. Like any other country, Iran has some friends, has some foes. The main friends of Iran are the European Union, Palestine, Venezuela, China, and Russia. They are actually friends with each other. They have a friendly relationship. They do trade, even though there are sanctions against Iran. They kind of trade with Iran, and they are the main reason Iran could survive 40 years of economic sanctions. But there are also some countries that actually are against Iran, that are Iran's enemy. Not enemy as in the fact that Iran will attack them or they will attack Iran. Enemy as in the fact that in their media, in their news, they keep showing a bad picture of Iran. They keep telling that Iran is a big liar and a dangerous country. In the Middle East, we have Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates, which really don't support Iran in any ways. And they keep competing with Iran for the role of the big brother inside the region. And outside the region, of course, the United States is the biggest enemy of Iran. And even though there is no real fight, and I myself have some good friends that are from the United States, the governments of the two countries are fighting each other in the media, in the news, in their speeches, day and night, because of the reasons I just told you. In other words, Iran is not a terrorist country. First of all, there is no such thing as a terrorist country, and even if there was, Iran is not one of them. Iran is not Arab. There is a difference between Iran and Arab countries, and Iran is not an Arab country. It's not an aristocratic dictatorship, and it doesn't have war. There is no war inside the borders of Iran. And Iranian people are not angry people. Yes, sometimes they get frustrated. Sometimes they get angry, as I do get angry sometimes. But Iran is not an angry country that wants to kill everybody. Actually, Iran is full of life, full of art, full of energy, and it has a huge diversity in culture, in food, in art, and it's really welcoming. You can easily go to Iran as a tourist and enjoy the beautiful sights of the country. And you can easily see that how welcoming the people of Iran actually are. In other words, what I'm asking you is that don't judge a book by its cover. or at least make sure it's the right cover. Thank you.
Okay, and thank you for your inspiring speech. And I think we learned a lot. So maybe you can take a little break for 10 minutes and come back to the Q&A time.